In the event of a disaster, you and your loved ones need a plan. Now, in order to make an informed decision, you need to know your options. Hurricane season is upon us, and Polk County Emergency Management has some tips that you're gonna want to hear. All the details are coming up on Polk Place. Welcome to Polk Place. I'm your host, Brian Lacey. Joining me in studio, Polk County Emergency Management Director Paul Womble. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian.
I only get to see you about this time of the year,
Yep.
at least in my office.
Right.
So as we heard in the opening, hurricane season is upon us. We don't want to say we know the drill, but we know the drill. Let's talk a little bit about safety, about having plans, things along that lines. What are some of the things you want the residents to know?
Yeah, everyone should have, an emergency plan, a disaster plan. We live in paradise here, but we have hazards that could affect our lives. Hurricane season, we're 6 months out of our year, from June through November. So we have other, we have severe weather and we have wildfires and all these things that most of the time they don't impact us. When they do, we need to have a plan and, for our families and our businesses and just know what to do. It's not things that, take a lot of thought and forethought, but you don't want to try to come up with your plan, especially with a no-notice event. When you don't have time to think, you don't have time to, share it with your kids or your family or understand if you're at work, what happens, or, we have so many differences, but yet everybody should have a plan.
What are some of the things that should be considered in that plan, especially with what we're dealing with the COVID-19 coronavirus? One of the things that I've done since I moved down here is slowly get my list together and get my things long shopping before, because you just, with working with you guys, I don't know when I'm going to get a chance, if I'm even going to be able to. So talk about the importance of being prepared.
Yeah, so part of that plan and part of that preparedness, whether for hurricane season or just generally throughout the year, but especially for hurricane season, is what happens if you don't have power at home. You probably can't cook. You may not have water. You may not be able to even have a can opener. If you've got canned food, that's great. But if you don't have a manually operated can opener to open that canned food, then what? So a kit, a disaster kit, and certainly food, bottled water, some things you can prepare. What happens if you go home today and the power's off in your house? How are you going to prepare food? So in hurricane season, or even in severe weather time, which for us generally is in the winter. In Polk County, our history of severe storms and certainly our largest tornado outbreaks have been in the winter, generally right around Christmas, actually. So if you don't have power, how are you gonna prepare food? How are you gonna flush your toilet? Bottled water to drink. All those things are, when we talk about preparedness and having a plan, that's part of it.
Part of that plan includes sheltering, whether it's going to be in place or whether it's going to be with family members elsewhere, or the option that we like to talk about as a last resort is sheltering with Polk County shelters. And given, like I said, the current situation, what are some of the things that we see we're going to be faced with in our shelters, and the things that we want our residents to know most of all?
Yeah, so COVID has really changed the way we need to prepare for sheltering. Really the intent or the main thing with COVID is to stay away from each other. The distancing and wearing masks and the things to keep each other safe. So throughout this hurricane season, those things will be here, unfortunately. So for hurricane sheltering in Polk County, we don't have evacuation zones. Coastal counties have those because of their proximity either to the Gulf or the ocean with the water. We don't have that issue here. Our evacuations in Polk County are really based off of two things. One is wind. So if a mobile home, an RV, or some type of housing that, high wind could impact and make it not safe for you to stay there, or rainfall, flooding rainfall areas that historically flood. We have those all over Polk County. That's what our evacuation orders are based off of. Our sheltering recommendations are based off of those things. So for plan, and this is not new due to COVID, our message has always been, if you live in one of those two types of areas, if that applies to you, plan A should be to have a friend, a family member, or someone you go to church with that doesn't have to evacuate. If they live in a newer home, concrete block, or a newer house, and there's some things that can be done to fortify those homes to protect them even more, you should go there. You'll be more comfortable. Our shelters are in schools, and they're made, and that whole program is there for people that have no other choice, but there's plenty of other choices. Another option that you hear some people talk about, we're going to leave the area, or we're going to go to a hotel or a motel. Those are good options. The gamble with leaving the area is what happens if you go to somewhere else and the storm turns and goes there. What happens if hotels are full? We know they fill up historically, especially in Hurricane Irma just a few years ago. We know that hotels were full several days before and several days after the storm. So if you wait too late or wait too long to try to if that's your plan, then you may not have anywhere to go, or you may be stuck in your car. So our shelters are always the last resort. Even more so this year, there will be precautions for COVID, face coverings, temperature screenings, all those kind of things. And in those environments, you're in a building. It could be a school, a hallway, or a classroom, or a portion of the school that meets the hurricane shelter criteria with a whole lot of other people. We're going to try to get people socially distanced as best we can, but there's some risk to that. So again, it's not a new message, but if you need to evacuate, if you need a safer place to go in Polk County in a hurricane, our shelters should always be the last choice, the last resort.
One of the things that we've learned throughout exercises is that practice makes perfect, and that practice in previous exercises, things that go along that lines, has really helped with dealing with the COVID-19 coronavirus. And of course, now that coronavirus and COVID-19 are blending into hurricane season. Talk about how you guys are really on point when it comes to this, and we're at the start of the season.
Yeah, so a big part of what we do in emergency management is build relationships between all of our partners in the county. So for sheltering, it's the county and the school board, the sheriff's office, and the Department of Health. Those are our normal shelter partners, so that's not new. But being able to apply the COVID restrictions and requirements and all the changes, just having those relationships, knowing those people, being able to place a phone call to somebody else that, doesn't work for the county, and they answer the phone, and, we work through the issues together. But we've coordinated the statewide. We've been on statewide sheltering calls, with all of the other emergency management agencies in the state. And we've been working on that really since even well before hurricane season started. This is not just a Polk County thing that's happening, and the description of masks and face coverings and screenings for everybody, that includes the staff. That's going on all around the state of Florida. So everyone will be following those same type of recommendations and precautions.
Lastly, I want you to talk about, from the leadership, from the BOCC, from the board to the county managers on down to your staff. Let the folks know at home what the professionals are, what their mindset is, and making sure that the people and the property of the residents are safe.
Yeah, that's really the goal, is the safety of our citizens. So everyone is prepared, as aware as they can be what needs to happen and what should happen. And from the staff, if we have a hurricane, I'll be at work. If we have a hurricane, school administrators that work in those shelters, at the schools that are shelters, they're going to be in those buildings in a hurricane. Now with COVID requirements and impacts from COVID-19 as well. So part of that is it's really safety, and that's not new either. We want folks to understand how the shelters work, how our evacuations work here, because we are an inland county, and be able to make the decisions that they need to keep their family safe, keep themselves safe. And that's part of that preparedness message, part of having a plan, and certainly to, if you don't have any other choice than to come to our shelters, that's why they're there, but understand that there will be things to try to minimize the impacts from COVID as best we can and still keep them, out of the hazard, especially high wind from a hurricane.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you for coming in today and sharing the message of Polk County Emergency Management, and anything we can do to help you further that message. Come back and see me again, will you please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian.
Polk County Emergency Management wants you to be prepared this hurricane season. Potential threats from hurricanes include powerful winds, heavy rainfall, storm surges, coastal and inland flooding, and tornadoes. The Atlantic hurricane season runs through November 30th. Now, it's important to create a kit of supplies that you can take with you if you are forced to evacuate. Now, this kit will also be useful if you have to stay in your home but are still affected by the storm, such as through the loss of power. If you prepare your kit ahead of time, you can alleviate a lot of potential stress of a very chaotic situation. Now, if you need more information on hurricane preparedness, go to www.polk-county.net or give emergency management a call at 863-298-7000.